Welcome to the Modern Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Giordani. Special guest today, Mike Blair. Mike is a realtor, runs a team of 17 plus agents, and then also does consulting with investors and flippers because he used to run a flipping company himself or was a part of one. So I'm excited to have you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I know this is last minute, but thanks for coming last minute.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. So
Yeah, for sure.
where do we want to start? When did you get into real estate?
Yeah, I'll start with the real estate story, right, of how I got started. So I actually got recruited into real estate, which is different than probably 99% of the people that are real estate agents or are in the field. Mm-hmm. Two of my best friends, they were running a real estate team on the retail side, on the residential side, and they had reached out to me. I actually owned a different company at that time, and they reached out and asked a question that was powerful for me, and I still use this question. They asked, "Hey, Mike, who do you know that might be able to come into our team and help us run and scale the real estate business?" And I was like, well, I might be interested in helping you do that.
Right.
What they didn't know was that I was actually in the process of kind of moving on from the company. I was 50-50 partners in a company at that time, and so I was moving on from that. And so timing was perfect when they asked me that question. I interviewed for the position, and my day one, I started as a director of sales and operations for a real estate team. No license, never sold a house or anything like that. But I had a business background, and so they trusted me to do that.
Was it corporate, like a corporate business background?
No, it was a Keller Williams team. Oh, background-wise?
Like before, yeah.
Yeah, so background-wise, I actually had owned a branding agency that we did, custom apparel and design and, clothing line brands and corporate brands and things like that.
Cool.
And then before that, I actually owned two restaurants, both actually here downtown San Diego.
Nice.
A long time ago. And then before that, I did have a corporate background. So from 16 years old to about 27 years old, I was actually a corporate executive, kind of towards the latter of those years, the last 4 years of that corporate run.
So how long were you at the Keller Williams journey? Because I know you're somewhere else now.
Yeah. So that all happened in August. My first day was August 1st, 2017.
Okay.
And so I was with the Keller Williams team for about 3 years. So in 2020, at that point, they had made some adjustments and moved brokerages, and at that point, I made a decision to move on from that organization, and I ended up finding a real estate investor through a friend of mine from high school that I kind of jumped into their organization.
Interesting. So that was 2017 where you jumped into their organization, or 2000?
That was the original. 2017 was my first run at the Keller Williams team, and then 2020 I transitioned into the investor company.
Cool. And then how many deals was the investor company doing at the time?
At the time, I think they were doing maybe 60 or 70 deals. Mostly, I would say probably mostly or almost all flips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about that. So you do consulting for investors to kind of dial in their process, their system. What does that look like? Walk me through. I know you can't give away the secret sauce because you sell it.
Yeah, I can give away pretty much everything, and the implementation is where most people fall short anyway.
100%. Yeah, we know that both as from an agent side and from any business side. Implementation is important. So talk me through it.
Yeah, I would say to take a step back, it is also very similar to how I kind of coach and consult the agents on my team.
Sure.
So I actually treat the agents on my team almost like individual clients, right? They all have their own business plans and own objectives. And so instead of having a blanket kind of operational plan for agents, it's customized. And so that's the same with the consulting clients. And so for me, it's more about understanding where they're at as a business, what their objectives are, and then understanding, well, what's holding them back, right? Whether that's sales or marketing or operations or finance, right? The four main components of any company. And usually you can find out fairly quickly where those holes are and what departments those holes are in, whether it's talent or the right systems or the right tools or training.
Right.
And so my job is to go in and look at those things kind of holistically and see what we can do to improve upon the most important things that are going to move the needle towards the goal.
And I think right now, moving the needle, I think a lot of people, and I'm sure you probably agree with me, it's probably more leads right now. It's more sales. How can I get more leads as an agent, or how can I get more leads as an investor or wholesaler or whatever it is? Like, they're looking for deals. And I think that's what we're lacking in this market right now. So what would you say for people who are out trying to source deals as an investor, as an agent?
Yeah.
All those are going to be different, but
yeah, for sure. I would say leads is a part of that. But more importantly, a lot of it really comes down to conversion, right? Because there's actually a lot of leads out there. There's actually a lot of houses for sale. There's a lot of deals going on. And so leads not necessarily is the issue. And it's the same with agents, right? Like usually there's not a lack of leads. It's a lack of quality and conversions and maybe offers, right? Because if you go on the MLS right now, there's 1,000 homes for sale. There's 1,000 leads. So is there a lack of leads or homes for sale? Not necessarily. And yet, how do you convert those, right? And so it's the conversations around talking to the agent, or if you're direct to the seller, talking to the seller, figure out how to put a deal together. Like what would make sense for that person or what would make sense for that agent.
So it sounds like you're talking about sales process.
It is process, yeah. I would say. Yeah, because I would say the leads are for the most part are there, right? Most people, in my opinion, don't have a leads problem, right? Because you can look at their pipeline. I'll take an agent for an example. It's easy. An agent can host an open house. 10 people will walk into that open house. There's 10 leads right there. They walked physically into the house. So now what's the challenge? It's not a leads challenge, not a leads problem. It's converting. It's converting, right? It's how do you deliver enough value? How do you make an attractive offer to that lead to be able to convert that lead into wanting to work with you?
Right. What's an attractive offer for someone who's looking to get more business from open houses? What's your process for your agents when they're going and holding open houses for them to convert more? If they have 10 people that walk in the door, I remember I used to use an app and make everyone sign in, but everyone's different on how they use open houses. What's your way?
Yeah, and everyone is different, and so there is no one kind of
size fits all. Yeah,
size fits all, or one perfect way. And so we try to customize that based on personality types and based on value proposition from each person. Right? A newer agent, maybe they have more time on their hands. And so maybe they're leading with, you know what, I actually only take on 2 to 3 clients at a time so that I can deliver ultimate value and service to my clients. And so you can lead with that if you have more time on your hands, right? Other agents that are maybe more experienced or are more effective, then they could lead with the track record. And so it's how you communicate and deliver that value to that person walking in that is a potential client.
Right.
And so I would say, it starts with the mindset and how you can structure and communicate that value, but then also executing on what are all the things that are going to get you the best results possible. So when it comes down to an open house, for example, right? Are you putting out enough signs? Are you door knocking the neighborhood? Are you cold calling the neighborhood? Are you inviting people to come, right? Because it's not just a go and wait for everybody, right? You have to actually take action too to increase your chances of people walking to the house. And so if you're doing all that and then you have a valuable and attractive offer or value add to the client walking in, then there's more potential that you're going to actually not only gather a lot of leads and then convert those leads.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's not like you can just put up an open house sign and expect to get a ton of leads that go through. And it's funny, coming from the title world, everyone's asking us like, oh, what's everyone else doing to get, by the way, I'm retired now. So I don't know if you know that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
People always asked us like, oh, what's working for other people or other agents? And I'm like, well, it's everything, right? Like you have to, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go put up an open house. It's like, oh, how many ringless voicemails did you do? How many text messages to invite to your sphere, or emails did you send out, or cold calls did you make, or door knocking did you do before your open house to leverage that and get people in? And then the barbecues, right? Like I feel like people used to do a lot of the neighbors only for an hour and do food and all those things. But it's important to leverage and show that you're different, because now with 21,000, how many agents do we have in San Diego? Who knows?
20,000 and dropping, I think now.
Yeah. I'm sure it's going to cut in half by the end of the year for sure. But yeah, you have to stand out and be different.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you this. Where are you seeing the best results with the newer realtors who are getting into the market?
Yeah, I would say the top 3 pillars for lead generation and then converting those leads is probably still open houses, even in today's market, right? Because there's still people looking and a lot of people on the sidelines. And so they're kind of still scouting out things in case rates change or drop or things like that. So open houses is definitely one of them. Focusing on sphere, actually, people you already know. a lot of people miss that, right? I think that, maybe they're scared or there's some fear in their mind about talking to people that they already know. And yet, if you can get over that and really understand your value proposition and almost come to the agreement with yourself that if you don't talk to your friends or your family, then you're actually doing them a disservice by not adding value to them. If you can understand that part, then you'll actually talk to your sphere and add value and get some clients out of that, get some referrals out of that. And then the third pillar is social media. I think social media, for a lot of businesses is important to build your brand and build awareness and talk to your audience. And so those I would say are the three pillars for most agents that are getting started.
I was 18 getting into that. You said, talk to your sphere. When I first got into 2009 is when I got into real estate. I was a realtor first. And I was so scared to talk to anyone around me because all my friends, I'm 18 years old, right? They're at the bar drinking. No one's buying a house.
Yeah.
And, not a lot of people around me even own houses. I'm like, why they're not going to trust this 18-year-old kid to go sell them a house or sell their house. And I had that stigma in my head for the longest time. And then even until I got out of selling real estate in 2017, but even right before then was still tough for me to talk to my sphere.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of agents struggle with that.
Yeah. I think it's just a limiting belief, right? Especially if you're 18, 19, 20 years old. The youngest agent on my team, I believe, is 20 years old. And that is a limiting belief. And so my job, right, as their leader is to help them develop their belief system, right? And help them understand that, well, that could be your biggest advantage is that you're 19 or 20 years old, right? You have more energy. You have, you can adapt faster, right? You probably be able to pivot through different mediums and channels and marketing and stuff because your mind is probably sharper at 20 years old.
Right.
So I attempt to teach them how to use that to their advantage and then build their belief that because of those things, you actually have the advantage. And if they can understand that and grasp that, then I continue to tell stories, right?
Right.
I bought my first house at 25. And so I ask other people, right? I have some clients that have bought houses with me in the past in their early 20s. And so I tell them, well, had I not talked to them and understood that they could actually buy a house, I would have never known. And so because I opened my mouth, they bought their first house at 22 or 23 years old. And so I have to share those stories to get them to believe that there are some people that will buy a house at 20, 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to open your mouth and find those people.
Totally. I think I had like an almost imposter syndrome when I was younger, right? Because you're still trying to learn the business. You don't know everything. You don't know what you don't know until you kind of figure out the business a little longer, where then you feel comfortable to talk to your sphere. But I think creating now with content, because when I was 18, 19, how old are you?
I'm 38.
38. Okay. So I'm 35. So Instagram, I don't even think was out when I was in real estate, right? I think Facebook had just started. So how do you gain credibility when those platforms aren't out, right? Because I think a lot of people that maybe follow us, like I think now, like if you were to go to a listing appointment, I guarantee you, your people are going to look you up on Facebook. They're going to look you up on Instagram. They're going to see what kind of content you're posting and things like that. And I think now it's easier to create credibility through your third pillar with social media, because now you're showing who your brand is, you're showing knowledge, whether or not you're reading a script and you don't really know as much as you do know, not you, but like the newer agents, it's almost your resume now, which creates like, it makes it a little easier to not actually have to sell your sphere because they're already following you, but you're creating content where now it's full circle, where they're believing, they're trusting you.
Yeah.
They're okay working with you.
Yeah. I think to address that is, at least on our team, it's to figure out where your leverage points are and who you're associated with, right? And so most of the newer agents, I encourage them to leverage my track record and background in your conversations and even in your appointments, right? I'm happy to go and help, assist when needed. And I think that kind of gets you to be able to transfer or share credibility.
Right.
And so that's what we attempt to teach. So that's why I like teams, right? Because you can lean onto somebody else and leverage that track record. And so the conversation is, let's say I'm a 20-year-old agent, never sold a house, never done a deal, don't know everything about real estate like you mentioned. then my conversation with my sphere is, hey, you know what? I just partnered with a really great team. They've done hundreds and hundreds of deals. And so I partnered with them because I'm learning at an accelerated pace. And any of my first clients that I get to work with, like they actually help me through it and work it through it with me. And so I get the advantage actually of serving you, right, Mr. and Mrs. Client, with my partner that normally wouldn't take you on as a client.
100%.
And so you actually have an advantage of working with me.
I love
and
that.
so if you can learn how to spin that and play to your advantage, which is totally true, right? Like I'm not going to have my 20-year-old agent go out on their own, right? They don't know everything.
Right.
We want to serve the client at a high value and high level, then we're going to do it together.
Yeah, you're going to handhold them through the process. Yeah.
So they have to learn how to use that.
I like that. What are you hearing with buyers with higher interest rates? Like, have you seen a lot of people sit on the sidelines? What is kind of the conversations that you're having with your buyers or your agents' buyers that are worried about interest rates? Is the economy getting brought up? What is that looking like?
Yeah, interest rates definitely come up, right? And so it's our job to almost downplay that or dismiss that conversation. And it does affect their purchasing power. So I think the bigger conversation is purchasing power, right? Not necessarily the rate itself. It's, okay, well, we live in San Diego, right? And so the rates in conjunction or combination with high price makes it harder to afford the house. And so then our conversation comes down to, okay, well, what would be comfortable for you, right? What kind of payment obviously can you qualify for? And if you can get something now and refinance that later, then I think that would be a great option, but at least you're buying something that you can actually still afford now, right? And so we encourage buying and being involved in real estate long-term, because then you probably won't be affected so much. And so the conversation around that is, leading with the value of being a homeowner,
right?
And in the long run, and then also talking to them about refinancing or talking to them about buy downs or other options, right? Credits. What if we can get you a credit, right, to buy down the rate? And what if we can get you a credit to cover your closing costs, right? Would that offset your fear of buying?
Sure.
And if it is, then we continue to move forward, right? Because it's our job to not quote unquote sell them on buying a house. It's our job to make them aware of what are the possibilities and where are the benefits, right? And if you see the benefit and possibilities of buying, then it's our job to figure out, okay, well, how can we make that work, right? With buy downs, with credits, with other things.
It's funny because no one's going to sell someone to sell or buy a house, right? Like the job of, I think the job of being a real estate agent is an advisor, right? Like it is a sales job when it comes to certain aspects of it, when we're dealing or you're dealing with other realtors and having to negotiate and things like that. But when it comes to the consumer, we're an advisor to what they're doing and guiding them through the process versus like, hey, I'm selling you this house. No, not really. Yeah. Like you want to buy this house. I'm not selling it to you.
Yeah. So and we already know they want to buy a house.
Right.
So they're just looking for, okay, well, how do I do it, right? How do I make it work and still be able to afford living in San Diego?
Totally. Controversial topic.
Yeah.
NAR, with this whole settlement thing going on. What where's your head at with that? Well, like your opinion based on this whole NAR thing.
Yeah, I mean, I like to focus on the things that I can control.
For sure.
Right. And so like for myself and for our team, we obviously address it, right? So we're aware of what's going on and we understand the nature of what's taking place with the lawsuits and with commissions and whatnot. And yet my focus and our focus is continuously getting better, right? And so if we can just focus on continuously adding value and getting better as agents, understanding the game and understanding the rules, then some things we can't control and we just have to learn how to play the game still. And so I actually don't really care or don't really get caught up in what's going on in that world. And my job is to adapt, right? When things are implemented, okay, well, how do we continue to add value? How do we showcase our value to clients? And if it does come down to a time to where the buyers actually have to pay the buyer's agent commission, I'm excited because I might be able to get more out of that buyer because I'm going to over deliver on value more than anybody else would. Yeah. And so sometimes I've taken 1 or 1.5% from a buyer's agent or, from the buyer's agent standpoint because that was the commission. Well, now I actually can control that, right? And I can say yes or no to future commissions if I'm in control of having that conversation and delivering an elevated value.
Has sellers brought it up to you at all in terms of commission?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been like, I would say, I don't want to say no completely because it's been mentioned, and yet
Yeah, I don't
No.
think it's a real. It's interesting. I do have an opinion on it, and I agree with you. You can only get better,
Yeah.
right? These types of things come up, and there's some people who dig their head and put their head into the sand and like just give up, right? And like, oh, screw real estate. I'm gonna go get a job at Starbucks or whatever because now buyers agents are getting paid. Look, at the end of the day, it's all been negotiable this entire time, right? It's just not public information. I do think that I could see it shifting at some point to where there's going to be those sellers who are like, no, I'm only going to pay my listing agent 2.5%.
Yeah.
But hey, as a buyer's agent, you can go in and submit a commission instruction on your offer that says, hey, I want seller to pay me 2.5% on it's the CBB, I think is what it's, yeah, CBB. I'm like, okay, cool. You're just negotiating the same thing that may have not have been there before, but like now you can control what your commission's going to be based on your offer.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. That's what I can see that happening down the line where agents, I'll tell you, I was in this roundtable and a lot of big producers in the room. And everyone had, the bigger producers were very quiet. And some people did speak what they were talking about. There's people who are very pissed off, like, oh, I'm not going to show that house if there's no commissions being offered. But then there's other people in the room, and I know these people are killers. That and to be honest, if I was an agent, I would say, screw it. I'm going to go on these listing appointments. I'm only going to make my seller pay my commission and make the buyer's agent submit a CBB to me. And I'm going to tell the seller, hey, look, the buyer's agent may negotiate their commission with the buyer. There's also a chance that they're going to make you pay for it too. It's based on offer. You don't have to accept it. You can counter it out. We do whatever we want. Ultimately, you just have to pay my commission and we can figure out the rest later. And it's all a negotiating tactic. To me,
Cool.
You can go and leverage. I think that that's going to be something that some of these big teams will start implementing where every buyer's agent is going to have to submit a CBB on every deal. Right. And that's just where as a seller, why do I have to pay the 6% or 7%, whatever it is, right? Like, why? But I get it because buyers can't afford to pay it either. But when that market shifts or something changes, I do think that I could see people doing that. Do you agree?
I agree with you. And I think that, it'll create other changes in the market, right? And so if lenders start saying, well, we can add 15 grand to your loan because you're putting 20% down or whatever maybe their criteria might be, then that could be used to pay down your agent's commissions so that you can buy the house. Then they just finance the loan, right? So there's going to be other options, I think, that are going to take place.
And I think they just announced that recently.
Pretty much for the most part.
Yeah, the lender. I just saw something.
I don't know what the rules or limitations are going to be, but yeah, they did announce something like that.
It wasn't like reoccurring. It was something different where you can have some type of credit up to a certain amount. I don't know if it wasn't with VA. I think it was only with conventional.
I think it's conventional for now.
Right.
Because the VA, right, zero down and then they basically giving you 15 grand. Like, I don't know if they're going to allow that, but they're going to come up with something that'll work.
Yeah. Otherwise, and I think again, this has all been negotiable. So I think just as anyone that's an agent just needs to sharpen their tool belt and have a better process at what you're doing. And I don't think the first thing to do is like, hey, if they're not doing a commission, no, it's okay. I'm going to submit them a CBB at what my commission rate is. They want to counter me out if there's multiple offers, whatever it is. Like, hey, it's not like you're just not going to get paid as a buyer's agent. So I do think that this whole thing is just kind of a bunch of bullshit. There's so many laws.
I agree.
Have you heard about like a bunch of people getting sued right now too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I know of so many brokerages and people getting sued for frivolous lawsuits, right? Like someone really close to me is getting sued for an easement. So their brokerage represented the buyer. Everyone signs off on the title report, right? Everyone signs off on the easements. Like your TC sends it. I have to, like all the houses that I'm purchasing, I have to initial the title report, right? To know that like, hey, there's easements here. That I at least saw it. And they're getting sued because there was an easement on there where there's a utility easement, but it was like where the seller thinks that it devalued their property by $40,000. Wow. So now they're suing the brokerage for this $40K, and they're like, dude, you signed the title report. You read it, you reviewed it, you signed off on it, but yet you're suing us. And to be honest, the guy's going to win. like the
crazy.
settlement,
Yeah.
right? Because they're just going to settle.
Yeah, give them
and
10 grand or
give them 20 grand to walk away and see you later. But just drag it like most of these people are just kicking the can down the road. It's interesting when the market changes like that. You're just like, man, all this stuff just comes out of the woodworks of lawsuits and bullshit.
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
And we live in California also, so we're just prone to that, right?
Yeah, I know. Thankfully, I haven't been into any personal lawsuits. Yeah. Have you?
No,
to deal
on
with
the
it as an
personal
agent?
side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As an agent at the brokerage? That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So let's talk about the flipping stuff. So you work for a big flipping company for a long time, and now you kind of consult and advise, and I know it's not a cookie cutter thing. But walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I essentially, I guess for lack of better terms, I was like the integrator or COO for a real estate investment company that primarily flipped houses, was involved in, acquiring and holding rentals and multifamily as well. And so I did that for about 3 years. And so scaling up teams, doing it in different markets, I would say at the peak, definitely well over 100 flips a year. And so, to do that, right, there has to be some systems and some tools and some accountability in place, and obviously the right team members. And so that team, grew significantly on the team member side of things while I was there.
How many employees?
I would say probably about 50 team members total, and some were potentially, 1099s or agents or just other resources. So that's why I use the word team members.
Gotcha.
Not everybody was on staff.
Yeah. How are you guys sourcing? What years was this?
That was from 2020 till early 2023.
Okay. How are you sourcing multiple 100 flips a year?
Combination. So I would say the top 3 lead sources are direct to seller, right? If you have that marketing budget to go direct to seller. Second one is from other agents that or that you build relationships with. And third is from wholesalers. So I'd say those are typically the top 3.
Nice.
So we were getting deals from all 3.
What was the percentage split between all of those?
I would say in the beginning, it was definitely more agent focused, right? And so walking a lot of deals that were on the MLS and submitting a lot of offers and moving that direction. And then as more deals get closed, right, then you start allocating a marketing budget. And so you can go direct to seller. And so I would say agent and wholesalers were majority, and then direct to seller kind of was catching up behind that.
Nice. I mean, 100 deals, was that like 5 million of revenue a year?
I don't know the exact number because we were in different markets and things like that. So,
oh, okay. What markets were you in?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say so. We're in some Florida markets and California markets.
Oh, okay. Do you have an NDA signed with them still?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, flipping virtually would be kind of challenging.
Yeah, so we weren't actually doing it virtually. So we had actual teams in each market.
Oh, okay.
So part of my job was to acquire talent, right? And so find the right team members that we can, have a sustainable team in a particular market.
Gotcha.
So that we can, oversee deals from afar, but we had boots on the ground and people in place in those markets, in those neighborhoods.
The scalability of flipping companies, I always see that being a challenge, especially in let's say use San Diego, for example. Like to get to 100 flips a year, it's as a operation or as a CEO or a head of that, it's a lot of work, right? The construction side, project management, employees, oversight, getting deals, deal flow, financials, all that stuff. It is, I don't know that to be honest, it's worth doing that many deals in this market. Like, I think there's so many easier ways now in terms of a scalability perspective. I mean, we see the biggest one in our market, how many wholesales they're doing per month, which can be virtual, which can be in any market. You could do all over the country and set up the same systems and processes in other areas and dominate that way. I've always loved flipping because I came from the realtor side. So I wanted to be able, and I get a ton of business from realtors. So I love the flipping aspect of it and the transformation. But then when you start transitioning into the direct to seller stuff, it's kind of hard not to look at, hey, do I want to wholesale this one? Or do I, what do I want to do with it? And when some investors are only want to make 20K, or they think it's worth 50K more than what you thought it was worth. So
yeah, I think, I mean, to interrupt you real quick, I think that it really depends on what the objectives are of the company. And I also think that it really depends on what I call like the velocity of money, right? Like you can't just buy and hold a bunch of flips because you'll run out of money. And so some strategically split between flipping and wholesaling, or even wholetailing and putting it right back on the market for cash flow reasons. And so it's also important to understand where you're at from a cash flow perspective, how many deals you can actually take on. And then if you get that, let's say you can take 10 at a time. If you get deal number 11, it's automatically a wholesale, automatically a wholetail, because you're dialed into what your capacity looks like.
100%.
So I think a lot of people fail on that.
Yeah.
Also not recognizing that.
And they get a lot of, like, I know for myself, last year I got to a point where I bought too much at one time. And then I wasn't doing a ton of direct to seller last year, but where I got to a point where I was like, whoa, this is kind of scary. Got a lot of cash going out. And I don't know that I was expecting it, but I had to do it and learn that process to realize, okay, I know what my capacity is with how many flips at one time that I can do. And I need to be able to diversify. Or do I bring in a JV partner on some of the other flips where I'm not managing or involved or financially responsible for it, to where I can partner with them where it's still profitable on the upside of the flip. And that's something that I had to deal with myself, because I got to a point where I was over leveraged and I felt uncomfortable. And as a solo entrepreneur flipper, right, it's a lot of money to invest in a lot of deals at one time, especially in San Diego, right? It could be hundreds of thousands. At that time for me, it was like $500 and something thousand to have out at one time and still have mortgages and making the interest payments and all that stuff. So leveraging, being able to learn how to also take in money. And that was one thing that I didn't do up until recently, because I was the one where I was like, oh, I'll just invest in all the deals myself. I have the capital. But preserving your own capital to make the company run smoothly, especially when you have marketing and employees and things like that. I think people don't realize that until they're in that. And I realized it from diving in head first and like, oh shit, here's I'm going to sip a reality right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You can always raise more money, right? Or, I mean, not everybody can, but I think people like you can. And so I think it also comes down to really understanding, like, I would say not only the game you're playing, but also understanding that maybe you should, for scalability purposes, maybe you and other investors build in some metrics so that you can make decisions faster and smoother. For example, let's say if you're projected to make 50 grand on a flip, but then you can make 20 or 30 grand on the wholesale, like understand your decision matrix and say, well, okay, if I'm making 20 grand on the flip, then or 20 grand on the wholesale or 30 grand on the wholesale, I'll wholesale that every time if there's only 50 grand on the back end for the flip. Even though sounds like more money on the flipping side, I mean, that wholesale deal could take you 7 days or 10 days versus 3 months, right? And so your velocity to money is a lot faster, and it makes your decision making a lot smoother if you can build in some metrics like that. Because then you're like, should I keep this one and try to make 80 grand? Well, if 50 grand's right there on the table and you can make it in 10 days, like take the 50 grand, because that's what you've decided your strategy is. Right. I think a lot of people fall short on that.
They do big time. And that's what in the last couple of years, I've taken it as just a side hustle. And now it's like, I have cash reports, right? Like I know what's coming in over the next 3 to 4 months. I know what's going out over the next 3 to 4 months. So I'm like, if I want to take on a big flip, can I take it down? Can I sustain my marketing budget? Can I sustain my spend with taking on a couple here, a couple there? Or do I want to wholesale these and take the cash flow versus... So understanding your cash report is extremely important. And then also too, like, and that's the difference between amateurs and pros, right? And I think I had to learn that the hard way from having a ton of money out at one time. Is I was way too leveraged, and then it bogs you up, right? Because then you're like, wait, where's my next deals? Yeah, like these close, and I have like nothing else in the pipeline, and I'm like, well, shit, now I'm like 3 months behind, so I'm gonna have to wholesale some deals instead of flipping them, because then I'm gonna be, my cash conversion cycle is gonna be a lot slower. So it's important to realize that. And that's what I had to realize the hard way by doing it until I implemented some processes in my system, so where I can understand, hey, I can take on this flip or these couple of flips, and then I'm going to wholesale everything else, and then have that as a set standard. Even if I know that the deal is like, I'm going to make 80 as a wholesale or 120 as a flip, that difference isn't going to make or break me. Sure. Right. Or 50 as a wholesale and 120 as a flip. Yeah. And just understanding that and having that as like a standard of what you do and live it, and just doing it versus like, wait, I'd rather make the 120. And then you take it on, but then you feel stressed, right? You feel pressure, and you get that anxiety.
Yeah, but I think those standards also help scalability wise, because then as you build a bigger team, everybody knows what the rules are, right? Like, and they know what's going to take place if there's 80 grand flip or 80 grand on the wholesale fee or 120 on the flip. They know it's a wholesale every time at 80K.
Right.
And they know their cash conversion or their commissions or things too. And so scalability wise, you can also paint that vision because they know that the leader's dialed in. It's not like, wishy-washy every deal.
Yeah.
And that also helps at a scalability.
For sure. Yeah. The other scalability portion of it too is in the beginning of my journey, I was always going to the properties often, right?
Yeah.
Like you tend to like want to oversee, you want to kind of not micromanage contractors, but just
Sure.
where's progress at, make sure that we're there and present to make sure that we're lighting a fire under their ass to finish the projects on time. And I've taken all the last flips that I've done over the last, I would say 7 months. I think the majority of them, I've only gone to the property at most 3 times since when I owned the property.
Nice.
And I've tried to do that on purpose. And there's been a lot of times where I'm like driving by the neighborhood or like tempted to stop by, but finding the right contractors. Cause here's the thing, you can overwhelm yourself with going to those properties and you can disagree with me.
I agree.
Yeah. Going to the properties all the time takes away from you getting your next deal. And if you're not constantly focused on new acquisitions and new deals and new flow of deals, you're gonna have these deals. And what happens if you lose money?
Yeah.
Right. Like on some of these deals where I had locked up and then I didn't personally, but like let's say you locked up 4 flips and you're at the properties every day and you're micromanaging the contractors, and then all of a sudden you go to sell them and you can't sell them, but then you don't have any other deals in the pipeline to make up for a potential loss or holding time or anything else. You kind of fuck your cash. You fuck up your cash.
The business really fast.
Yeah. So it makes it complicated.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to touch on your point is that I think, especially for you, you've understood, where your value is, right? And what that dollar looks like versus, spending time on the wrong things that maybe take away from money or aren't your highest and best use of time, right? You walking a house, babysitting somebody, what do you make on that, right? $0,
right?
Versus you focus on business development and training and finding the next deal. What do you make on that?
Right.
Tens of thousands of dollars, right? And so like most people trade $0 because they didn't realize that their value is in the other stuff, right? In the higher producing activities.
Yeah, 100%. I think the people who are like, you're treating it as a hobby versus a business when you're constantly having to go to the projects all the time. I think when you're constantly there and having to micromanage, it's not a sustainable business because you can't continue to do that in scale. And some people don't want to do it in scale. Some people just want to do their 5 to 6, and I totally get that. Yeah. But for the people who do want to scale, you have to get to a point where you let go of control over some of that stuff and make sure you're bringing on the right contractors where you trust them enough to where you don't have to, or hire a project manager, right? You can pay someone a salary to go visit those properties, especially if you're able to go and do acquisitions or go scale your acquisitions, because then at that point you're bringing in more deals, more leverage, and you can scale that way versus overwhelming your time with shit that's $10 an hour job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you have the right systems and set the right expectations, then you don't have to babysit as much, right? You still have to oversee or have a project manager oversee certain things or your contractor, right? But if you have systems that are full of communication or have pictures or videos or progress reports or things like that, and everything's in place, then you don't really have to go and babysit, right? Because the reason why you want to go is to catch any mistakes or make sure that they're not, putting the wrong tile or doing the wrong bathroom or whatever the case is. But if they send you a progress report at the end of the day, then, you're on the right track.
Yeah. So. And a tip for people who are doing that, who are walking their projects, something that I've made my people do, and I'm sure you probably advise on this too, something that I've made my contractors or people who are working on my projects is this app called Company Cam.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can upload photos. They do progress photos almost every day. If not every day, it's every other day or every 3 days. They're doing it multiple times a week though. They're uploading all the progress photos on Company Cam so I can see where they're at. So I've done projects that were 2 hours away to where they're uploading photos every day, and I didn't even have to go drive 2 hours to go visit the project because at that point, it's a hobby. It's not a good use of my time to go drive. It's not a business that you're running. It's not a business I'm running, and I needed to focus on acquisitions, right? Yeah. So a tool for that, Company Cam is great. You can leverage 100%. FaceTime, right, for updates and things like that. One of the things that I've loved and we have local, and I don't know if you know who she is, but Melanie, she does all of my design on all of my flips. And so she comes up with a design plan, orders all material, right? They have a floor plan layout of what walls need to get removed, what walls need to take, where are you putting your tile, how are you laying the tile, what tile goes in which bathroom, what flooring goes where, how you lay your flooring. That is the best money that I can spend on all of my flips, because then I'm not like on Amazon ordering door handles or replacing the air conditioning vents and things like that need to get replaced, that you have to order one by one or go to Home Depot. And she's just ordering all of it, shows up to the property, and they're on their feet running, right? They know exactly what to do.
I think you willing to do all that legwork up front, right, separates you from a lot of the other investors, because it takes more work up front, but you're more dialed in and you have less room for error when you do that, right? You have your whole product list, you have pictures, you have, it's kind of hard to do the wrong tile when you have a picture sitting right in front of you, what exactly to do. So
yeah, you'd be surprised though.
It happens.
It does happen. I was going to say, because it's definitely happened where like I'm getting a call from I had one recently. I'm getting a call from the contractor. He's like, dude, these vanities don't fit in this bathroom. And I'm like looking at the plan. I like walk in, I call Melanie, and she's like, yeah, they were supposed to remove that wall. I was like, remove that wall, guys. Yeah. But I was like, I was mentally messed up, because I was like, wait, she measured it. She came here. You know what I mean? It's not her fault, but that's why she has a plan. She has a floor plan. But it's funny. You do have to train them in order for them to figure out how that process works correctly. Because there's people who I've used that I've had to train in terms of construction that then became good at doing flipping construction, because we're all like, our contractors need to be on our timeline. Yeah. Right. Like we need to get projects done. Like 8 weeks is like, I don't want to be in a project more than 8 weeks. Right. If it takes more than 8 weeks, like we did something wrong typically. And most of mine don't take 8 weeks. But yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that is like coaching the contractor, right, to your expectations. And, some of the contractors, they're really good at the work, right, and having the right crew, but they're not as good at logistics or starting with the right thing, because not all of them maybe have experience doing full flips. And so there is certain things you do first and certain things you do last, right? And so I think having an order of how you have to work through the project, or at least conversation around that, also helps, right? Because in your wall case, they should have known maybe the wall comes down first and then we start the bathrooms, right?
Right.
But maybe they just knew the wall was coming down, but maybe they didn't know when. And
I
so
missed
it
it
was like,
too.
oh, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So,
I missed it too. So when I was walking, I was like, they're doing the tile, they're doing all that stuff. So then we had to like pull up the tile on the floor, because then they had to retile that spot. It was partly my fault too. So I should have been paying attention, but I didn't think of it, because when you think of a vanity, it's still in a box. It's the last thing that you're putting down.
Yeah, you just throw it in. Throw it in.
Yeah.
Right?
So, when it doesn't fit, you're like, okay, wait, there's something wrong. There's a missing puzzle piece here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a big deal. So, what advice would you give to like new flippers or people who are trying to scale? Let's say they're trying to scale. They're going from being at the projects every day to trying to scale to a point where it can be a sustainable business model where they can do acquisitions and they can do flips all at the same time. What things would you implement fast?
Yeah, I mean, one is finding the right talent, right? And figuring out what are you good at and what do you enjoy. Like if you love going to the properties and overseeing it and like having those conversations, then you probably should keep doing that. But then you have to hire somebody else or train somebody else for other higher producing activities. And so I think understanding what your strengths are and what kind of team members you can bring on. If you're ready to bring on team members at that level, then I think that's important to understand. But I think maybe even taking a step back is operationally, what kind of systems can you start implementing, right? Maybe one thing on this project that you can start testing out, see if that works for you, whether that's a project manager board or company cam, like you mentioned, or things like that, and then start figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And so you build in these tools and systems over time. So I think starting to understand what that might look like based on where you're at is important.
Yeah, it comes out of personality type, because I have my personality type is like, I like doing certain things and I don't like doing others. I don't like going to the projects.
Yeah.
Like that's
so you shouldn't.
To me,
it's
like
draining to you. Yeah, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I like the sales aspect. I like acquisitions. I like talking to realtors. I like talking to sellers. I like getting the deals. I like the beginning portion of it.
Yeah, so then you find somebody to complement that, right? Like you throw an ad or you reach out to your network and say, hey, you know what? I'm looking for somebody that just absolutely loves walking houses, going to projects, and searching for things that might be wrong or making sure that things are on the right timelines. Who do you know that's organized and kind of build out the ideal person, because that's not you, and you start finding that person. And
right. And honestly, it's been contractors for me.
Yeah.
Like the people who I've been using have just been so solid that I haven't needed to hire a project manager for some of the deals. So it's been nice to just be able to leverage them, know that there's a process that they have that we've implemented to where it makes me feel comfortable. And if I do need to go check in on things, if they're like questions or things like that, then no big deal.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But like, at least I'm not there where I'm living at the house, you know,
Yeah.
7 days a week.
Yeah, and you're not stressed or worried like, oh, I got to go there tomorrow again, or I got to go there on Wednesday. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
like
like taken away from your mental capacity.
It
too.
is. Yeah. And then you know, the progress, I don't know. It just, for me, it was like never, at first I loved it. In the beginning, when you're first getting into flipping and stuff, it's cool to like watch the progress and see all that stuff. Cause I like home design, and construction. Like it's cool. But at the end of the day, like once you look at it like a business, it's just not a good use of my time. Right. If let's say I'm making 50K on a flip, but I've been there 4 weeks every single day. It's like, okay, then what am I really
probably losing money.
What am I really making on this deal at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I don't have any more deals, right? Because I focused on just the construction aspect of it. So, yeah, figuring out that like I think is really important for the beginning investor because we both see those people who are doing that
Oh, yeah.
consistently, and I think that's the biggest problem is letting go of control in the beginning,
Especially if you don't like it. Right?
Yeah. Married for a long time. We can get into some family stuff.
Yeah, I am married.
Yeah.
Love to travel. Right?
Yeah.
Like I actually just got back from Italy.
saw that.
And so, you know, I like to work hard and enjoy the business, but then also, you know, make sure that we enjoy our life outside of the business.
And you guys don't have any kids, right?
No kids.
Yeah. I think
2 dogs.
We've talked. Yeah, we've talked about this before. Any plans for kids?
No plans for kids at this point. And so, yeah, we just enjoy our life and, you know, have fun with each other and spend time with each other. And so we enjoy that for now.
I like that. Yeah, I got married last year, and
Congrats.
thank you. I think waiting a long time to not have kids is like at this point, and you probably agree, like love to travel, love to go out to dinner, love to do all those things. Our life is pretty selfish, and it's hard to think about bringing someone else into the world when we're just loving our, like where we're at in life. I'm sure like people are going to say like, yeah, you should have kids. It's the greatest thing ever. But if we don't, I'm okay with it. And it's nice to like, we're just enjoying life. So it's just different. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people get fulfillment from different things, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I love kids. I have a little niece that I get to see and play with and watch grow up and things like that. So, you know, things like that are super joyful, and yet, you know, we get fulfillment from other things. And, you know, my team are my kids, right? Or like my business partners, and like, you know, there's other things that that I enjoy and focus on.
Where'd you guys go to Italy?
This last time, I've been to Italy a couple times, but this recent one, we went to Puglia.
Okay.
And Bari specifically.
Okay.
If you've ever heard of that. Really cool. Like usually not on the map as much as, you know, the bigger cities. So that was cool. We went to Lake Como, which is also kind of not as big on the map, but I would say probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And then we ended up going down to Malta, which is an island south of Italy.
Okay, cool.
So yeah.
We were supposed to do our honeymoon this year. In the next few months, it just took, after you get married, it's like there's so much that happens in life, and you know, opening an office and just busy in life. We just forgot to book it. And then it was like 2 months away and we just didn't do it. We're like, all right, well, I guess we're going to leave it for next year. But we were going to do like the Amalfi Coast.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm Italian, Giordani last name. So we really wanted to go, and she really wanted to like go and take us to experience it. But holy shit, it's expensive.
Yeah. Amalfi Coast is expensive. We went to Positano and Amalfi.
That's where she wanted to
last
go.
time, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's worth it. Right. And you know,
The two, when we looked at business class, this was like a month ago to book for like 2 months from now.
yeah.
It was like $8,000
Oh my gosh.
per person. And I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a whole vacation somewhere else. And that doesn't even include stay. Like it was going to end up costing us like $40,000. It was because we booked it last minute.
Sure.
So
and you're probably going peak season. And
it
things
was,
like that.
yeah.
So I think that's an advantage that we have, right? Because we can kind of, I don't want to say travel whenever we want. And yet we typically don't travel as much in peak season just because, well, why would you? It's crowded. It's more expensive. And so like Italy right now, like when we went 2 weeks ago, it's not really peak season, but it's still super nice and beautiful. Weather was still good. And flights were cheap. I think our flight was $1,200 or something like. We're not business class, but it wasn't.
Yeah, see, I'm bad at flying.
But again, when you go off season too, right? Like, I mean, the last 2 flights, like the international flights that I had, there was nobody in my row. So it's like,
oh, so it's comfortable.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Maybe that's an idea. I definitely want to do it for next year. We're going to we have like 3 Cabo trips planned already this year. So it's going to be a lot back.
Yeah.
Like we had 2 weddings to go to. So it would have been Italy, a wedding. And then I think we have like a couple other trips planned. So I was like, that's a lot to go back to back to back. I'm like, we're going to spend like $60,000 just in traveling. So definitely going to be on my radar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool, bro. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me. And, if there's anything that you need, or maybe your audience that's watching this, they have questions or like, one specific thing that I could help them with their business. That's really what it's all about, right? I don't have any problem giving away everything that I know, because it is the implementation, right? There's a lot of components to building a real estate business or an investment business. And so it's hard to be somebody that can implement everything.
100%.
And so that's usually where I come in, is trying to figure out, okay, what can I help you with the most? Where can I add value?
Right.
And who can I introduce you to that maybe can add value to you, or maybe fill that gap or fill that spot?
Yeah.
Usually that's part of the solutions.
I love that. And all your info will be in the description.
Awesome.
Of the podcast on YouTube. So appreciate you guys for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.